Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're going to give it a few minutes to populate. We apologize for the delay. Good evening. We have a full house tonight, so we're going to give it a few more minutes. Thank you so much for your patience. Hello, welcome to tonight's LA County District Attorney Candidate Forum brought to you by the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles and our community partners. I am Joanna Mendelson, Senior Vice President of the Jewish Federation's Community Engagement Initiative. With less than 2 months away from a critical election for Los Angeles, we are grateful that incumbent District Attorney George Gascón and challenger Nathan Hochman are making themselves available tonight before the November election to share their visions for public safety in Los Angeles, including for the Jewish community. We know you'll find tonight's forum enlightening, instructive, and important. Jewish Federation Los Angeles is the leading organization supporting the LA Jewish community, including our community's safety and security. Unfortunately, particularly since October 7th, anti-Semitic incidents, including vandalism and verbal and physical attacks, have skyrocketed across the nation, as well as within our own city. Just last year, an active shooter targeted visibly Jewish worshipers on their way to synagogue in the Pico Robertson area. And this summer, violence broke out as protesters targeted a house of worship, Adas Torah. Many communities across Los Angeles have an array of concerns regarding criminal justice, community safety, and security. We look forward to hearing the candidates share how they plan to protect and improve the safety of all Angelenos. You can join tonight's online discussion online by using our social media handle @JFedLA across platforms. This forum will also be broadcasted again this evening on LAist at 9 p.m. at 89.3. A few points of legal housekeeping. Jewish Federation Los Angeles is a 501c3 nonprofit and does not endorse candidates. And additionally, unauthorized recordings of tonight's debate is not permitted. With all that said, we're honored to have Emmy-Award-winning journalist and Federation friend, Alex Cohen, who serves as Spectrum News's national political anchor, who will moderate tonight's forum. We're grateful that she's here with us tonight, and please join me in welcoming Alex Cohen. Alex.
Thank you so much, Joanna, and my thanks to the Federation for putting all of this together this evening, and thank you to the public for making the time for this very important discussion. The one thing that's great about Zoom debates is that people can join from just about anywhere. One of the downsides is that sometimes there are technical complications. With that said, I want to make sure that we have Mr. Hochman with us this evening, and that has been sorted out. Mr. Hochman, do we have you with us yet?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to very briefly review what will be happening this evening and how we will be running things, and then we will get started with our conversation. We will begin with 2 minutes each from our two candidates for an opening statement. We will hold a coin toss to determine who will have that position of first and second. We will then have a series of questions to which each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. We have a timer that should be visible to our candidates. It may not be visible to the public. Please note that if either of our candidates this evening refers to his opponent, then that candidate will have 30 seconds to respond to those remarks. Our questions this evening include questions that have been submitted by the public. We will strive to keep the questions identical for both of our candidates. However, given one candidate is an incumbent, some of our questions this evening may be phrased somewhat differently. And one final note that we would like for really our candidates this evening, we know that you've got opposing views in many arenas, but we hope that you really focus on your own policies and priorities and not as much on your opponent, so that we do not have to delve into response time and can cover as much ground as possible. I will, just as an extra visual indicator, when we've got about 10 seconds left on our clock, raise my hand. So with that said, let us get to a coin toss to determine who will have the decision about opening its statement. Mr. Hochman, would you care to choose heads or tails?
Heads, please.
All right, here we go. And it is tails. So, Mr. Gascón, you can choose to go first or second on our opening remarks. Which might you prefer?
I'll go first.
All right, and that means Mr. Hochman will go first with our closing remarks. So with that said, I believe we have our timer set and ready to go. Please use these first 2 minutes to share with us anything you would like to share about your candidacy, but we would also really love it if you include in your response a bit about when exactly you knew for certain that you wanted to pursue a career in the field of law and what inspired you to pursue this particular career path. And with that, the first 2 minutes go to you, Mr. Gascón.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex, and good evening, everyone. And thanks to the Federation for hosting this debate. Tonight you're going to hear two different candidates. You're going to hear two different views of the work. My opponent, who spent most of the last 2 decades defending tax evaders, a corrupt sheriff, and the powerful. And me, a career public servant, somebody that is running for you, not somebody that is running for himself. I was a former U.S. Army sergeant. I was a former LAPD officer, former chief of police, and a DA. I'm endorsed by Planned Parenthood, the County Democratic Party, the County Federation of Labor, dozens of community leaders and organizations, because they know about my unwavering commitment to public safety. Since I've taken office, I have spearheaded a balanced reform approach to community safety that prioritizes fighting violence instead of de facto blanket policies of mass incarceration of the past. My balanced reform approach has led to over 100,000 prosecutions of serious and violent crimes, prosecuting over 11,000 cases involving organized retail theft, and addressing residential burglaries by filing over 80% of the cases presented by the police. We have also elevated our attention to hate crime prosecution by having someone who was awarded an ADL award for his work on anti-Semitism and one of our supervisors. His approach has led to the highest rate of hate case filing in the state, with a conviction rate of almost 80%, rates higher than the previous administration. But you see, I grew up in LA, where a broad multi-ethnic coalition of diverse groups with the Jewish community's integral leadership that led to years of much growth and prosperity. Tonight, you will hear two different visions for our community. One full of Trumpian sloganism, half-truth, lies, and fear-mongering that will take—
And that is time, Mr. Gascón. That is 2 minutes. For that, I will turn to Mr. Hochman. Your 2 minutes for opening remarks, including when and why you were inspired to pursue a career in the law.
The Jewish Federation for hosting this forum. My family and I have been part of the Federation family for over 60 years. My parents were each chairs of the Jewish Federation. I am running for district attorney based on the lessons that I learned from my parents and the Federation about the importance of giving back, of bringing tzedakah, justice, into our community, and of the obligation to tikkun olam, to repair the world. As a lifelong Angelino, someone who was born here, grew up here, married over 31 years, and raised my 3 children in LA, I will not sit idly by while our current DA, who has never personally prosecuted or defended a single criminal case in his career, comes in from San Francisco, having destroyed that city's public safety, and comes to LA to try to destroy ours. Instead, I will fight for what I love and use my 34 years of criminal justice experience as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, as an LA City Ethics Commission president, to restore safety in this community. We have given you, Mr. Gascón, almost 4 years to run your social experiment with our safety, and you have failed. People and businesses live in fear, justifiably so, of having their home or car or stores robbed. Jews and other minorities live in fear, since you won't prosecute those who shut down freeways, an airport, college campuses, or engage in violent acts in front of a Pico Boulevard synagogue. The only group that does not live in fear are criminals. Gangs can't believe the good luck that they have had that you won't prosecute gang penalties. Violent criminals are thrilled that you are trying to get rid of the three strikes law. Your policies are so pro-criminal and ineffective that 98% of your prosecutors voted to support your recall, and 37 cities passed no confidence motions against you. This ends on November 5th, when the voters finally have their chance to have Gascón gone and work with me to restore safety and bring real and effective criminal justice reform to our county.
That is time. Thank you very much. And we will take turns alternating with our answers. So this first question, for which you have a minute to respond, goes first to Nathan Hochman. At the heart of this race are some very fundamental questions about the criminal justice system. Here in the year 2024, what do you believe is working, what is not working, and why do you think that is? 1 minute. Mr. Hochman.
I'm sorry?
You on mute. Go right ahead.
I'm sorry. Here's what's not working. Extreme policies on both ends of the pendulum swing. George Gascón's decarceration blanket policies that say certain criminals and certain crimes will not be prosecuted, not because the facts of the law change, but because of his personal political agenda. I reject that. I also reject mass incarceration policies. They failed as well. I come down in the middle, and I call it the hard middle, because you've got to look at each case individually. Look at the defendant's background. Look at the impact on the victim and the crime committed to determine who the true threats are to our public safety and need to be behind bars, and the ones that aren't. Your first-time nonviolent offender can very well serve their debt to society, and they have to serve it with a community service, diversion programs if they have a serious mental illness or drug addiction, or restitution if they steal, pay it back. The hard middle is the correct approach.
Mr. Gascón, to you, 1 minute for what is working, what is not, and why in our criminal justice system.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, what is working is that for the last 3.5 years, we've prosecuted over 100,000 serious and violent crimes with very successful rates of conviction. What is working is that when we began to have a national problem with organized retail theft, we became part of multiple task forces that we have prosecuted over 11,000 cases involving organized retail theft and holding people accountable and ensuring that those that are committing these crimes are being held accountable. What is working is that when we have problems with hate crimes, we have gone after that, and we're leading the state in the way that this case are prosecuting. Also, what is working is that we're working to support victims by adding additional victim representatives. We're working in Sacramento to ensure that we continue to develop legislative bodies that help us, like, for instance, in the case of organized retail theft, where we just have 10 different legislation, some on that we endorsed and all that we supported in order to address the problem with organized retail theft. What is also working is we're bringing equity to a place that a lot of the equity issues were not being addressed.
And that is time. We will start this next question with you, Mr. Gascón. According to reporting in the LA Times, you have filed felonies at the same rate as your predecessor. And yet one key difference that many critics cite is your approach to enhancements, which can add years to a sentence. Would like to hear your thoughts on enhancements and their effect not only on a criminal, but also on the community. You have 1 minute to respond.
Yes, first of all, I'm glad that you raised the fact that we file felonies at the same rate and we're getting convictions at very much the same rate. And we continue to work on those cases aggressively. We use enhancements when it is appropriate. We have filed over 12,000 gun enhancements, for instance, in cases where it is appropriate. But what we're not doing is what the past we used to do, was sometimes we even filed gun enhancements in cases where a gun was seen but was never found. We're also ensuring that we are mindful of the fact of the problem with wrongful convictions. We are looking for ways to ensure that our convictions are clean. We're also looking at things like diverting people when they have the opportunity to get to a better place. We're also addressing issues of environmental justice. We're addressing issues of waste theft, which is the biggest theft crime in our county. We're also addressing the issues of police accountability. We want to make sure that system accountability takes place as well. The bottom line is that there are many things that we're doing that continue to work, and there are new things that we're doing that are brand new and are also working. And that is why when you look at the crime numbers for the city of LA, LAPD just recently published their numbers.
We will be getting to crime numbers later this evening. That is our time. I know we're moving at a fair clip, but we do so in hopes that we can cover a lot of ground. Mr. Hochman, you have 1 minute to talk about the topic of enhancements.
Certainly. Please don't let George Gascón gaslight you tonight. And he will do it in many, many different ways. Enhancements is a perfect example. So if you are a part of a gang and you are engaged in a gang-motivated violent crime, George, for decades, starting literally in the 1990s, you could have an extra penalty, an enhancement put on your sentence, which deterred people from joining gangs. It weakened the strength of gangs. But George Gascón comes in, and he says, based on his political agenda, not the facts and not the law, he will no longer impose gangs and enhancements on gang members. So what has been the response? Gangs have gotten stronger. Gangs have been able to recruit more. In fact, the people they are recruiting are the 16 and the 17-year-olds. Because one of the other things that George Gascón has done is said he's not going to prosecute most juveniles for the most violent crimes that they will commit. So the gangs are not done. George Gascón has been a gift for gangs. And that is one of the key enhancements he refuses to impose, even though the state legislature has given that tool and has been effectively used by DAs for literally decades. The same could be true for the gun enhancement. Why he won't impose the gun enhancement if you use it during a crime? It deters using the gun. Mr. Gascón.
That is our time. And because you repeatedly cited Mr. Gascón by name, Mr. Gascón, it is your opportunity if you would like 30 seconds to respond, or we may move on to the next question.
No, I would, Alex. Mr. Hochman struggles with the truth. Tonight, he fails to understand the role of the district attorney, and he continues to look for ways to address the issues by sloganism, by half-truth, and by lies. And I understand that that is very consistent with his Republican background and certainly the people that support him in many places. But the reality is that when you look at the crime numbers, you look at the way that we're filing cases, the way that we're prosecuting cases, none of what he's telling you is true.
All right, that is 30 seconds. And Mr. Hochman, as you just heard, he spoke about you. If you would like 30 seconds here before we move on to our next question, we will give you the opportunity to do so.
Certainly. Look at the California Department of Justice's statistics that Mr. Gascón won't cite, dealing with all the different types of crimes involving enhancements as well: violent crime, property crimes, shoplifting, hate crimes, human trafficking, fentanyl murderers. They are all up double or triple digits. Mr. Gascón isn't, when he finds a fact he doesn't like, he just gaslights you and says, don't trust your experience, don't trust the California Department of Justice statistics. Trust me, George Gascón, I'm telling you the truth. That is as far from the truth as you're going to hear tonight.
All right, that is again 30 seconds for you. And I'd like to remind both of our candidates that we would like to stress focusing on your policies and positions more so than that of your opponent. So our next question is a bit about history and society. The last election for this office.
He run all over my name again.
And if we do this all night, we will not move any further. So we've both had our opportunity. Let us try to focus on our own policies and positions would be my advice to you both. But I think these next questions will allow you to continue to explore your positions. As mentioned, this next question is about the political context. The last time that the election for this office was held was, of course, during the COVID pandemic and in the wake of George Floyd's murder and global protest. When it comes to criminal justice reform, how do you think our society has evolved over these past 4 years? And to what extent is your personal approach to the position informed by those shifts? And Nathan Hochman, we will begin with you. You have 1 minute.
Certainly. My personal approach to criminal justice reform is born by my experience as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney for 24 years. I've gone into court, unlike my opponent, who has never actually been in a courtroom arguing a case, and argued for defendants, asserting their constitutional rights for 24 years. I view a person who has been in jail for even one extra day and otherwise is factually innocent needs to get out immediately, unlike my current opponent. I view that anyone who engages if a police officer crosses the line and engages in criminal conduct, I brought cases in the 1990s against police officers, dirty cops, who went ahead and crossed the line. I personally convicted them. I also believe that the overwhelming numbers of law enforcement are doing a fantastic job in very dangerous circumstances, and those officers deserve our respect, our admiration, and unlike the current district attorney, our partnership.
All right, that is your time there, Mr. Gascón. If you would like to talk about changes you've perceived over the past 4 years and how that informs your response to law and order.
There are some questions. There is a different climate today than it was in 2020. But the reality is that communities continue to want safety and support, and most of us want fairness as well. The reality is that we're doing the work which was based on the very beginning in 2020, and we continue to do so and evolve. It's a balanced reform, addressing problems in our community, addressing those that are causing harm, and ensuring that there is appropriate consequences for criminal behavior. When you look at the data, you take a look at, for instance, gun enhancements, we filed over 5,000 gun enhancements. When you look at use in special circumstances, as a matter of fact, we just got a conviction today on a brutal murder. We file special circumstance where someone will get life without the possibility of parole. We have a committee to review these cases, and when it is appropriate, we file enhancements like life without the possibility of parole. But we're also mindful of the drivers of mass incarceration that have created so many problems for so many communities, so much insecurity and recidivism, and that are not making us any safer.
And I believe you'll have an opportunity to discuss more of that in our next question, which will go first to you, Mr. Gascón. On your first day in office, you announced a sweeping set of directives. Which of those have you or would you be most likely to reverse, and why? A minute.
When you consider that the directives that I put together, they were all addressing issues that have been raised by so many members in our community, and we have evolved. We have created additional exceptions. We have created a committee to review cases, for instance, involving special circumstances, or for instance, when we want to evaluate the possibility of prosecuting a minor adult. When we very early on, there were concerns about hate crime allegations. And we brought those back in because I believe that given the tone of the societal issues having to deal with hate crimes post-2016, I thought that was an appropriate step to take. The reality is that we are doing the work. We continue to evolve. When you look at our crime numbers, especially year-to-date crime numbers from the LAPD that were recently published, it shows that the work what we're doing is making an impact. What we don't want to do is we don't want to go back to the past. We don't want to go back to the days of mass incarceration, the seeking the death penalty, sending hundreds of kids to adult prison. Those are the things that we're avoiding, and we show that our work is having an impact because crime is not necessarily going up across the board.
We will get to crime data in just a bit. And the question there was maybe what revisions would you make to those directives? Mr. Hochman, a slightly different question to you. Which of the directives, if any, that George Gascón has implemented, do you believe might make the most sense and might you want to continue on if elected, and why?
Certainly. So again, of the direct, especially on day one of George Gascón, he came in with 0 years of criminal justice prosecutorial experience and told over 750 deputy district attorneys how to do their job and didn't ask them to tap into their thousands of years of collective experience. On my day one, I will work with those prosecutors. In fact, got the endorsement of their union and have met with over 350 of them. And here are the special directives that I would get rid of. Extreme blanket policies. For instance, like the ones that say you're not prosecuting juveniles for misdemeanor offenses, which is basically saying you're not going to go after someone who's under 18 if they steal $950. That has been a license to steal in our community, and store owners are pulling all their hair out at this point to figure out what to do. Basically, but I'm not going to go back to mass incarceration. When I bring back, for instance, the gang enhancement or the gun enhancement, we're not going to go to the other end of the extreme of mass incarceration.
That is time, and I do just want to give an opportunity. Mr. Gascón shared some of the things that he revised. The opposite question went to you. I just briefly, 10 seconds, is there any of these directives which you believe you would keep in place? That question is from Mr. Hochman. Are there any of Mr. Gascón's directives? I just want to give him an opportunity, because the question, Mr. Hochman, to you is not which directives might you get rid of. Are there any that you would maintain? And if the answer is no, that's fine. I want to give you an opportunity to answer this question.
Certainly. Are there special directives that are extreme, that take discretion from prosecutors' hands? I would not maintain one of them.
All right, thank you for that. We're going to move to our next topic, and for those just tuning in, due to some technical difficulties, we are getting a bit of a late start, so we are trying to keep this on time and on track and be respectful of everybody's time this evening. Our next series of questions is about a safety within the Jewish community, and Mr. Gascón, we will have you answer this first question. We are, of course, thousands of miles away from a part of the world where violence and bloodshed has reached new heights over the past 11 months. As our host tonight, the Jewish Federation of LA can attest many Jews living in this region feel especially vulnerable. What do you believe is the DA's role in addressing anti-Semitism? What policies at the county level will you promote to address the recent rise in anti-Semitism? You have 1 minute to answer.
Yeah, I believe that the role in this, what we're doing, is to ensure that we're prosecuting those that are causing harm. And if you look at our data when it comes to hate crime prosecutions, including that involving anti-Semitism, we're leading the state not only in the number of cases filed, but the rate of filing the cases. Our prosecution rates are higher than under prior administrations. And we're doing this because it is important that we send a clear message. As a matter of fact, we upgraded the way that we handle the intake of those cases by having a supervisor, someone that was awarded recognition by the Anti-Defamation League just a couple of years ago for his excellence of work in dealing with anti-Semitism and hate crimes in our county. We're also understanding that we have to provide public education. So we spend a lot of time working with other members of our community, working with the county, working with other partners in order to make sure that we educate people in how to report hate crimes, how to come forward, how to assist someone else when they're the victims of a crime. When you look at the prosecutions that we have engaged in, we have saw not only about an 80% conviction rate, but in many cases, we're sending a message, we're sending very stiff prison terms in those cases.
And that is your time, Mr. Hochman, to you, the DA's role in addressing anti-Semitism.
Certainly. My personal experience is that I've worked with the Federation and the ADL to combat anti-Semitism for 40 years. Here's my view. If someone wants to go on the street corner in Wilshire and say things that are vile and reprehensible to me, that is their First Amendment right, and I will protect that. But if that same person wants to go ahead and shut down a freeway, shut down an airport, go ahead and defile and vandalize a college campus and engage in violent acts on it, and then go ahead and engage in violent acts against Jews as they are entering a synagogue on Pico Boulevard, they're going to go to jail. And a DA needs to be proactive, needs to set the lines in society so everyone knows where the lines are and where the consequences are. And that's exactly what I will do. George Gascón has remained incredibly silent when those violent acts have occurred. He's willing to comment on Azerbaijan invading Armenia, but will not call out Hamas when they engage in the biggest atrocity against Jews in the last, well, since the Holocaust. I will make the DA's position loud and clear that if you attack Jews or any other minorities in these communities, you will go to jail.
Mr. Gascón, as you heard there, would you care to spend 30 seconds in a response to those direct remarks?
Yeah, I do. Again, Mr. Hochman continues to indicate his lack of understanding of our work. Many of the instances that he's referring to are misdemeanors committed in the city of LA that are being prosecuted when the cases are presented to the LA City Attorney. But understanding that Mr. Hochman does not understand how we work jurisdictionally here, my message is very clear. I'm going to start with the Jewish community as well as I will stand with every other community to ensure that their rights are protected and they are respected and they have the opportunity to enjoy open spaces as anyone else in our community.
All right, Mr. Hochman, very clearly heard you address there. If you would like to take 30 seconds to respond, and then hopefully we can move on to the next question.
Certainly. So, Mr. Gascón, what part of a person, a pro-Hamas protester, engaging in violent acts against Jews as they are entering a synagogue on Pico Boulevard, do you think does not constitute a felony crime? That is what the DA is actually all about, Mr. Gascón. You might know that if you had ever prosecuted a single criminal case in your entire career. You haven't. I've done it for over 10 years, and I will set a very firm and bright line that if you go ahead and attack Jews or any minorities in our society, you will go to jail.
All right, gentlemen, I would ask us all to take a deep breath, and a reminder to both of you and our audience this evening. We're hoping to really focus our discussion on what you would do if elected or re-elected to this position. With that said, and continuing on this topic, as classes in our region resume on campuses, what role can and should the District Attorney's Office take in protecting freedom of speech while simultaneously protecting students from harassment and other crimes? And in respect to the arrest and violence that we have seen on campuses in our region, what do you feel is the appropriate legal response? Mr. Hochman, we will begin with you. You have 1 minute.
Certainly. We have to protect both First Amendment speech on campuses and protect the students that want to just be able to go to class and express their own First Amendment rights. What happens when a DA does nothing? I mean, for instance, with those violent acts in front of a synagogue, Mayor Bass called them abhorrent. Governor Newsom came in and said they were completely unacceptable. George Gascón, nothing, silence. That silence emboldens people to see where the lines are. How much more illegal conduct do you have to engage in before George Gascón or the DA, and if I'm the DA, I will make sure this is clear, says no. That is the line. If you cross it, there are real consequences for your action. If you don't have a DA set those lines very clearly, then the criminal aspect of that illegal conduct will keep testing the line, right? We had someone shut down the 405 freeway as part of an act of illegal conduct because the DA has not set the lines. And so again, we can do both.
And Mr. Gascón, the question is about our campuses and how you approach balancing free speech while protecting students from harassment. You have 1 minute to respond.
Absolutely. First of all, we must protect the First Amendment, but that does not mean that we protect people from harm when they're harming others. And we have prosecuted aggressively people that have been arrested for felony conducts on college campuses in LA County, and will continue to do so. And then in areas where we have misdemeanor jurisdiction, which we don't in UCLA or USC or campuses that are in the city of LA, we have prosecuted those misdemeanors as well. We prosecuted many cases in Claremont colleges, but again, felony cases have been presented to our office concerning violence on college campuses. We're prosecuting those cases, and we will continue to do so. And we're working closely with the administrations of the different universities to ensure that we can help their police departments when they're looking for guidance in filing cases or investigations, because it's critically important, not only that we protect the First Amendment, that we protect the students and everyone involved.
Thank you very much for that response. And gentlemen, we are going to turn now to a topic that has already been broached this evening, which is crime statistics. And when it comes to assessing safety in Los Angeles County, there are any number of crime metrics which can be used to argue the case about where exactly we are in this present moment. Mr. Gascón, beginning with you, can you please share with us 1, 2, no more than 3 statistics which you believe are the most germane in understanding current crime trends, and share what you think are the circumstances behind that data. You have 1 minute.
Sure. When I took office, we came after an administration that had increases in violent crime across the board for the last 8 years. Not only did we have increases, but we had increases sometimes at higher rates than there were in other parts of the state. We immediately got into COVID, and even within that period of time, we started addressing the drivers of violence. Year to date, 2024, LAPD just reported their most recent numbers, and both crimes against persons and crimes against property have gone down year to date when compared to 2023 and when compared to 2022. Homicides are historic lows countywide. The reality is that when you look at violence and you look at crime in our communities, we have challenges. We have had problems with organized retail theft. We have problems with auto theft. We're dealing with those. But when you look at the overall numbers and you look at the numbers over a period of the last few years, you see that our numbers are actually lower. In many cases, are consistent with the downward trend.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hochman. We will turn to you. I have a very strong feeling that you have a different outlook on our current crime statistics. Again, if you would cite just a few and what they reveal to you about the current state of public safety in LA County.
Certainly. George Gascón is again gaslighting the public because what he's doing is selectively using the statistics that he seems to like. LAPD statistics from 2024. What he's not looking at is the California Department of Justice statistics for LA County. That's all 88 cities, Mr. Gascón, not just the one city of LA that LAPD is in charge of. And those statistics show that for each year you have been in office, 2020 through 2023 at that point, violent crime is up double digits. Shoplifting is up 133%. Property crimes are up double digits. Hate crimes up double digits. We are the capital of human trafficking under your watch, and fentanyl murders will kill more 18 to 35-year-olds than anything else. So again, those statistics are a record of public safety failure. You have tried a social experiment with our public safety, and it has failed. And now it's time to end it.
All right, Mr. Gascón, once again, the first 2 words that I heard there were George Gascón. I did not hear Mr. Hochman's name mentioned in your response. So if you would care to have 30 seconds to respond before we move on to our next question.
Absolutely. 1,500 organized retail theft cases prosecuting the most hate crimes of any jurisdiction in the state, both in raw numbers and per capita, and getting the results in this cases that no one else is doing. I'll leave it at that.
All right, Mr. Hochman, we'd like to start with you on one of the most salient and viral examples that I think this region has seen of crime over the past year or so has been retail theft. A flash mob can dominate online and on television newscasts. What do you believe is the most effective legal response to this particular sort of crime, and why? You have a minute.
So what we've seen with these organized retail crime situations is that the crime is, in effect, starts small. It starts with one juvenile going into a 7-Eleven, stealing just under $950 because they know that Mr. Gascón has a policy that says the DA's office will not prosecute that person. Then 2 other juveniles see what's going on. They go into a Walgreens. Then you have a flash mob recently going into a 7-Eleven, over 100 kids ransacking the place. And that then creates a spiral of lawlessness that leads to smash and grab robbers, that goes up to people breaking into your car, your home, your store, that leads to more violent where people actually kill you over your catalytic converter. We have to stop that spiral of lawlessness, and it stops by holding people accountable at each level, but proportionally and reasonably accountable. That's the hard middle approach. Rejecting mass incarceration, but going ahead and making sure that people pay their debt to society so we can arrest the spiral of lawlessness and turn it into a spiral of lawfulness.
Mr. Gascón, your best legal response to the crime of retail theft.
Yes, we have now prosecuted over 11,000 cases involving organized retail theft. About 92% of all the cases that are being presented by the police we're prosecuting. But not only that, we're also participating in the various task forces. that are dealing with this issue, and it's coming down. Additionally, we're addressing the other end, the back end of this. We're addressing through legislation how we deal with the platforms that are selling the stolen property. We're also dealing with legislation to ensure that we provide better tools to deal with some of the organized crime aspect of this. Additionally, I have met with merchants. I'm meeting with community stakeholders. I had a meeting at Freedom Plaza, for instance, with many of the merchants there in order to understand their needs and work with the LAPD in this particular case in order to deal with organized retail theft. And we will continue to do so because the way to deal with this problem is both prosecuting the cases, is addressing them when you have legislative solutions, and also working with the community.
And Mr. Gascón, we will go to you first for this next question. We had many members of our audience tonight express deep concerns about crimes that are being committed by young people. Do you believe that there should be a different approach to prosecution of Angelenos of a certain age? And is there any circumstance under which you believe a minor should be charged as an adult? Mr. Gascón, you have the.
Yeah, first of all, I understand the concerns, but when it comes to crimes involving juveniles, we have done a great deal of work, not only to address the low-level offenses, but also to address violence when they're engaging in violence. Juvenile crime overall is down. In fact, it's substantially down. When we're dealing with some juveniles that are committing heinous crimes, where we believe that it may be appropriate to seek a transfer into the adult system, we have created a review board composed of 3 top executives in our office that will take a look at the case when a prosecutor wants to transfer that case into the adult court system. When this board comes to the conclusion that there is an appropriate solution, we have done so. Now, I have to tell you, one other component of this that often is not discussed is that the laws have evolved tremendously. And transferring a juvenile into adult court has become increasingly more difficult. In fact, we have had cases that we have tried to transfer, and the transfer has been denied.
And Mr. Gascón, we will leave it there, and we will hand things over to Mr. Hochman. You have a minute on the clock to talk about young people and the crimes they commit.
Certainly. The overwhelming number of juvenile crimes should be prosecuted in juvenile court, but there are exceptions where juveniles effectively commit adult crimes, like multiple murder type of crimes. And those are the cases that should be transferred into adult court. Mr. Gascón came in and had a blanket policy of never transferring a juvenile into adult court. Well, that actually ended up tragically for a situation with a guy named Damoni Lee, who was 16, participated in a murder of a gas shop attendant. And Jackie Lacey, the predecessor, said that he would be tried as an adult, but Mr. Gascón reversed that. He got tried as a juvenile. And even though he had committed this murder, he was out by the age of 22 and then committed another murder. That is the real life consequence of Mr. Gascón's policies when he is treating juveniles in a blanket fashion of not going ahead and treating them in the most serious situations as adults.
And that is time. Mr. Gascón, a clear reference there. Would you like to take 30 seconds to respond?
Sure. Understanding the law is a critical component of being your district attorney. And the law today, when it comes to juveniles, is very clear that the only way that someone under 18 can be transferred to an adult court is if the prosecutors can show, with the preponderance of the evidence, that the juvenile is not rehabilitatable. It really doesn't impact what type of crime they have committed as whether they're rehabilitatable. Now, it has to be a very serious crime anyway. We are and have thought transfers when we believe that the juvenile shows signs of not being rehabilitatable. We have succeeded sometimes, and sometimes we have failed. But again,
There, in order, forgive me, Mr. Gascón, we have to stay on track here, especially for those who are just joining in. We had a little bit of a late start to our live Zoom meeting this evening. We are going to move next to the topic of homelessness. And here, Mr. Hochman, the question will go first to you. Homelessness is an issue that about everyone can agree vexes just about every neighborhood in our region, and it is not a problem that can be solved by any one leader or any one group. That said, please explain as you see it what the DA can and cannot do when it comes to addressing our unhoused residents, and how you deal with unhoused residents who are also dealing with severe mental health challenges. Mr. Hochman, you have a minute.
Certainly. Law enforcement needs to be a partnership with various organizations in the city, like the Los Angeles Homelessness Service Authority, the Department of Mental Works, the Department of Vocational Services, and the Department, again, dealing with the different types of nonprofits that deal with the homeless as well. What Mr. Gascón has done is effectively taken law enforcement out of that partnership. He has told law enforcement officers they can't prosecute when they get into a homeless encampment people using methamphetamine, using heroin, using fentanyl. If they're engaged in prostitution, loitering, disorderly conduct, they have actually, Mr. Gascón's policies has prohibited law enforcement from doing anything about that. And where law enforcement is not a partner with these other social service organizations and the other nonprofits, the chance of truly getting people with mental illness and drug addictions into the court system so they can get the drug court, the mental health court treatment that they otherwise were not getting on the street is impossible if you have 4 more years of George Gascón.
Mr. Gascón, your 1 minute on the clock to talk about the DA's role in addressing homelessness and mental health crises.
You know, when it comes to unhoused people committing serious crimes in LA County, they get treated like anybody else. People that commit violent crimes, people that cause harm to others are being prosecuted at the same rates that we would prosecute anyone else. When it comes to misdemeanors, again, it requires an understanding of the law and jurisdictional lines in our county. Misdemeanors in the city of LA, misdemeanors committed in many other cities of the county, do not get prosecuted by the LA District Attorney's Office. But in those places where I do prosecute misdemeanors, we look at the cases, we talk to law enforcement, we look at those that are repeat offenders, and we look for the right solutions. If it's diversion, what is taken, what is needed, we look for that. If it's drug treatment, if it's mental health treatment, or if it's a straight out prosecution, we'll do so. Again, serious violent crimes, we have jurisdiction countywide, and we aggressively pursue those, and we work with law enforcement every day to do this. Misdemeanors, it depends on what part of the county you're at. If you're in the city of LA, you have to talk to the LA City Attorney.
Speaking of what constitutes a misdemeanor, we have had a lot of audience interest this evening in Proposition 47, which, as many of our audience likely knows, was approved by California voters a decade ago. It sought to reduce California's prison overcrowding by making some theft and drug crimes into misdemeanors. Mr. Gascón, we will start with you as you co-authored the initiative. What was your aspiration for Prop 47, and how successful do you believe it has been in the 10 years since its passage?
Look, the aspiration was very straightforward. We were incarcerating Black and brown people at disproportionate rates, sometimes for possessing a very small quantity of drugs. I was a police officer for a very long time. I remember police officers scraping a coke pipe to get a residue of tar cocaine and getting a felony arrest that put 40,000 people on the average, mostly Black and brown, in prison because of small possessions of drugs, while most of the other rest of our community was using drugs at the same or higher rates without any consequences. Proposition 47 not only did that, but Proposition 47 has put $100 million a year back into our communities to deal with treatment and to deal with after-school programs. As a matter of fact, over $1 billion have come back to the community as a result of Proposition 47. I'm very proud of that work. Now we have areas that we needed improvement upon. And working with the legislators and the governor, we just passed a package of 10 bills to address the issues related to theft and organized retail theft. And those will take effect January the 1st.
Mr. Gascón, that is your time. And Mr. Hochman, most notably, you did not co-author Proposition 47, so a slightly different question to you. What impact do you think this initiative has had on the state of California? And if you could please be specific in what evidence has influenced your assessment of Prop 47. You have a minute.
Certainly. You are right that Mr. Gascón was the co-author of Proposition 47 when he gaslit the public back then and called it the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. And what it effectively did is it turned felony both theft and felony drug cases into misdemeanors. But then it got then Mr. Gascón actually became the DA of Los Angeles and passed those policies saying he's not going to go ahead and let law enforcement prosecute these misdemeanors or have his DA's office do it, which effectively is now given a license to steal for people under $950, particularly juveniles. That's what he has created on the store owners throughout Los Angeles County. Did the same thing with drug use. So if a police officer sees someone strung out on methamphetamine, heroin, or fentanyl, the DA's office has been instructed not to prosecute that misdemeanor. And by the way, as far as misdemeanors go, Mr. Gascón does not, again, share with you that over 70 of the 88 cities in Los Angeles County don't have a city attorney's office, and it's the DA's office. In every unincorporated area, including East Los Angeles, and all of the unincorporated areas have only the DAs to enforce misdemeanors, and Gascón is completely missing in action when it comes to enforcing those misdemeanors.
Mr. Hochman, that is time. Despite our somewhat late start this evening, we're going to try to end things relatively on time. So we're going to move to a few final questions. Mr. Hochman, we'll begin with you, and let's have 1 minute on the clock for this. Name the one thing that your opponent has said tonight or in the past that you most agree with. 1 minute.
That I most agree with. I would say that Mr. Gascón has identified problems in the system, problems dealing with prior systemic racism, both for the police, for prosecutors, even for prisons. But it's his solutions I couldn't disagree with more. Mr. Gascón's solutions are to adopt an extreme decarceration policy that says up front, we're not going to look at the facts and the law. We're just going to enforce his political agenda that is predetermined that certain crimes and certain criminals will not be prosecuted. So while I agree with his identification of problems that I, with my 34 years experience, will tackle and effectively deal with, I completely disagree with his solutions that have completely deprioritized our public safety and created the lack of safety that 2/3 of Los Angelenos feel tonight compared to when he entered office.
All right, Mr. Gascón, over to you. And a reminder, the question is here. Something that your opponent, Mr. Hochman, has said either tonight or in the past that you most agree with, and why. You have a minute.
I'm not going to go on and attack my opponent here tonight over this. I believe that he believes in public safety just like I do. We have a different vision of how to handle public safety, and I'm going to leave it at that.
And that helps keep us on time. All right, Mr. Gascón, we will do a minute on the clock for each of you here if you choose to take it. If you are not reelected, what do you think you would do with your life and career next? Mr. Gascón, again, we will start with you.
Frankly, I haven't given it a thought because I plan to win.
Would you care to leave it there? We can hand it over to Mr. Hochman. If you were not elected to this position, what would you do next in life and why?
So I would continue doing what I've actually been doing. I've been a criminal defense attorney. I've been a tax litigator. I've been someone involved with business litigation. I've been a community participant. I sit on boards, whether it's the American Jewish Committee, the American Technion Society, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. I've sat on, again, very philanthropic organizations with my family. We participated with the American Wheelchair Mission. We've actually delivered over 1,500 wheelchairs to 4 different continents: Israel, South Africa, Vietnam, Ecuador, West Virginia. We've got a delivery coming up from Mexico. And by giving the gift of mobility to people, it's been incredibly rewarding, and to do it with my entire family has been extra rewarding.
Gentlemen, I thank you for giving us back some time. It will give us the time for 1 minute each now for our closing statements. Mr. Gascón gave the first opening statement, so Mr. Hochman will give the first closing statement. And as a prompt on that front, we would love it if you could include the following: what you believe is the most crucial action to take in the DA's office to make that office the most functional and effective that it can be. A minute is yours, Mr. Hochman.
Was it a minute or an hour? Because that type of question would take an hour. All right, please start my minute right now. There's no more important race for your and your family's safety than this district attorney's race. And the choice for DA could not have more stark contrast. On experience, I bring 34 years of experience in the courtroom as a prosecutor and a defense attorney with hundreds of cases under my belt. Mr. Gascón brings 0 years, having never personally prosecuted or defended a single criminal case. That's 34 years for Hochman, 0 for Gascón. On the public safety record, Gascón's record is one of failure, with violent crimes, property crimes, shoplifting, hate crimes, fentanyl murders of double or triple digits since he came into office. Don't let Gascón gaslight you into believing that crime is down when the California Department of Justice and your own personal experiences show that he is wrong. Gascón's social experiment has failed, and I will not. Your vote for Nathan Hochman.
Forgive me, we've got 1 minute now to Mr. Gascón for closing remarks. And again, we would love it if you could address during that time the most crucial action that you would take if reelected to make the DA's office as functional and effective as it can be. And Mr. Gascón, you are on mute still. Let's have you remove that mute button and we'll start your clock.
Sorry, last night we heard Donald Trump lie and fear-monger for 1 hour. Tonight we heard another Trumpian politician fear-monger. Someone that just 2 years ago ran as a Republican for Attorney General, that was just 2 years ago, 2 years after January 6th. And that was just 2 years after Roe v. Wade. And when asked if he had voted for Trump, he refused to answer that question. As I mentioned at the beginning of this debate, you have now heard two very different visions for the future of our community. One, that of my opponent, which is full of half-truth, lies, and fear-mongering, and mine, one that is a career public safety servant based on hope, on the future, passion for fairness and equality, and a firm commitment to protecting all of our communities. It has truly been a true honor for me having this opportunity today. Together, I know that we can and will make a difference. Thank you.
My thanks to you, Mr. Gascón, and to you, Mr. Hochman, to our lovely hosts this evening, the Jewish Federation, and to our audience for tuning in this evening on Zoom. If you've missed any of the remarks this evening, as Joanna mentioned, it will be broadcast again this evening at 9 p.m. on LAist 89.3 FM. And with that, I would love to turn things back over to Joanna Mendelson. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, DA George Gascón and Nathan Hochman, for participating in tonight's DA Candidate Forum hosted by Jewish Federation Los Angeles and our partner organizations. And thank you so much to Alex Cohen for moderating this lively conversation. We hope you found tonight's discussion informative and helpful as you consider your important decision at the ballot box. We are truly grateful to our partners in bringing you this forum: West Side Current, Valley Current, LA Magazine, LAist, Jewish Family Service LA, Board of Rabbis Southern California, ADL Los Angeles, and AJC Los Angeles. Please join us again next week for our LA City Council District 2 Candidate Forum on September 17th at 5 p.m., also on Zoom. And we look forward to hearing Adrian Nazarian and Jillian Burgos, with the discussion moderated by Conan Noland. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night.